If you are a guest, we are honored that you have come to worship with us. If you are traveling through, thank you for stopping and worshiping with us. If you are here for old time's sake or for nostalgia's sake, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be here as well. We are honored by your presence. And if you come here every single week, we never thank you, but I want to thank you as well. Thank you for being here as well. And it is a great week to be here. Benedict Arnold is somebody that we have all are very familiar with, and we all have a negative impression of. When you think of the classic trader, we all know in America that Benedict Arnold is the most well-known trader in our history. Now, what's fascinating, before he became a trader, he was actually an American hero. People loved him, and he rose up the ranks. He had a lot of military victories for America. He was in the merchant business in 1775 when the war broke out, and he was fighting for the freedom of America. There's actually a monument in Saratoga that mentions him, and he was in this battle of Saratoga in 1777, and they made this monument, and one of the Civil War generals actually put it there, and there's other people who are mentioned, but his name has been removed. This is what it said about his war ability. In memory of the most brilliant soldier of the Continental Army, who was desperately wounded on this spot, winning for his countrymen the decisive battle of the American Revolution, and for himself the rank of Major General. Now, he injured his leg in the Battle of Saratoga, and they say if he died from that wound, we would have universities named after him. We would have colleges named after him. He would have been a hero in our society in America. But because he kept on living, and because of his plot to take West Point, he is known as a traitor today. How does somebody who is so well esteemed become somebody that is so hated? Life has this way of judging you by the whole of your life, not by just one occurrence or one situation. Another guy that we see is this individual named Sosthenes. Sosthenes is a person in the Bible that you see kind of some references to, but very few of us are familiar with. How many of you, by a show of hands, have ever heard a sermon on Sosthenes? How many of you are even wondering if I'm saying that name right? I practiced this week. I practiced this. But I want to look at 1 Corinthians as we do our series of cast of characters. We want to look at this individual. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 1. Paul, called by the will of God to be an apostle of Christ Jesus, and our brother Sosthenes. Now look also in Acts chapter 18, verse 15 to 17. But since it is a matter of questions about words and names in your own law, see to it yourselves. I refuse to be a judge of these things. And he drove them from the tribunal. And they all seized Sosthenes, the ruler of the synagogue, and beat him in front of the tribunal. But Gallio paid no attention to any of this. So Paul mentions Sosthenes in 1 Corinthians chapter 1:1. Now he uses this term that I want to highlight here, our brother. Now you would think that this term is found in the original language, but it's actually not the same word for brother that they'd normally use for brother. it would be more kind of a gender neutral term. It's not brother or sister, but it would be more Christian or friend. But the term here is a term of endearment. It means that this individual, Sosthenes, is a close ally of Paul. And Paul is mentioning this guy, which is very uncommon in the literature that the Greeks would write. When you would write a letter during the first century, you never gave credit to anybody else. You would write the letter and you'd say, I, Matthew, want to brag on myself, and I, Matthew's the one that wrote this. And if there's nobody else that I feel I need to mention because I did it all. But Paul doesn't go with that approach. Paul includes this individual in his letter and states that he is a co-worker, but he is more than a co-worker. He is somebody that he has fond affection for, somebody that he can trust, a true ally of the gospel. We would use the term Christian today, but back in the time of this letter being written, the term Christian would not have been used that often. So he uses the term here to note, this is a guy that I can trust. He is a brother, as they transliterate this term. This is important when it comes to working in the church. I think everybody in the congregation, everybody who is a Christian, really want to believe that they have real friends. We search in a society looking for real connections. We want people that we can count on in the work of the Lord. And a lot of times we feel that we are kind of isolated, that we are just doing this Christian work by ourselves. And we don't always feel like we have a lot of allies in the church. People that you can truly count on. If you need them, they will be there for you. Paul is saying Sosthenes is an individual that he could count on. He was somebody that if you needed to call somebody up in the middle of the night, they would be there. If you needed somebody to help out with a project, they would be there. If you needed somebody to help you move on Saturday morning at 7 a.m., they may not be there. This is somebody that you could know they were going to help you no matter what. I think we all search for this. We search to have this feeling of camaraderie in the church. John 13:34-35 states, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." We mention this, but we all desire this. We desire having people that we can really count on in the church. We understand the reality. Not everybody is going to be your closest ally. Not everybody is going to be in your camp. Not everybody is going to be there when you need them the most. That is pretty much a neurotic expectation. But in the church, can you count on your fingers a number of people that are really your ally in the work of the Lord? Can you really count on certain people to be there if you needed to call in a favor? That's what we're really striving for. We're really striving for this ability to connect with people on a level that if you need them, they will come and help. Too often in church we say this, we need to love one another. You know what love really is? Not words, but deeds. True love you can count on. True love has action. Words are just sounds. Love are deeds. I remember years ago, I had this elder come into my office, and he was upset, and you can always tell when this elder was upset. He had the upset expression, and he had this hat, and it was this old kind of straw-looking, dirty, nasty, grimy hat. He always wore it. And he came into my office, and he would come and sit on my couch, and he'd take his hat off, and he would set it there next to him. And he looked at me and he said, "Matthew, I just thought I needed to come in and tell you that I will be resigning as an elder." And then he went in and he told me why he was resigning as an elder. There was a decision that was about to happen in the eldership that he could not stand for. So he was going to quit. And I looked at him. And I said, "You don't get that option." "Why do I not get the option of quitting? It's my choice." I said, "You don't get that option." I think he was curious. And I said, "You're an elder. And you do realize that this decision is going to be controversial. And if you resign right now, because of this decision, that's going to create division in this body. And you don't get to make that choice because that's going to hurt this church." He thought about it for a second. He goes, "Well, I don't know what to do." And I said, "Here's what I need you to do for me." I said, "You're a great elder. You're a great man. I need you to stay an elder, and then whenever I'm gone, you can quit and do whatever you ever want to do, but I need your help here. You're supposed to be helping. I need to know I can count on you." And I remember he picked up his hat, he put it back on his head. He says, "Matthew, I will stay an elder as long as you are a minister at this congregation. I will give you my word." 14 years later, and 10 years after being gone, he's still an elder. But imagine if he quit that day. Imagine if he threw in the towel that day. Imagine if he just washed his hands of the scenario and kept moving on. That's somebody you can count on. When somebody says with their word, "I'll be here. You can count on me. I'm a true ally." That's what Paul is saying Sosthenes is. That's the term for brother that he is using. Somebody you know will have your back when it counts. Not a traitor, but a friend. But look at what happens here. Here's a guy that had to go through a few things. Sosthenes in Acts chapter 18, verse 15 to 17. "But since it is a matter of questions about words and names in your own law, see to it yourselves. I refuse to be a judge of these things." Now this is Gallio talking here. "And he drove them from the tribunal, and they all seized Sosthenes, the ruler of the synagogue, and beat him in front of the tribunal. But Gallio paid no attention to any of this." So they come and they want to get Paul in trouble because he is out preaching in this scenario. So they go to Gallio, the tribunal individuals, these Judaizers, and they say, "Well, you got to shut down Paul. He's stirring up some division. He's causing problems. And so you got to stop this, Gallio." And Gallio looks at him. He says, "I don't care. I'm not a guy that has your back. I'm not your ally. I'm a guy looking after myself, and this is politically not expedient for me to get myself involved in. This is a politician that says, I just want to hide away from the controversy and not go left or go right. It's just somebody trying to cover their own reputation. And so then the people come and they sit around, they can't find Paul. Somehow Paul has escaped. And they're like, well, we got to beat somebody. Who are we going to beat? Sosthenes. Let's beat him. So then they grab this guy who's the ruler of the synagogue. Now, we don't know yet if he's a Christian or not, but we know one thing. He becomes a Christian. They pull him out of this synagogue, and then they beat him in front of the tribunal, and Gallio says, whatever. Not my problem. Sosthenes is a guy that has taken a beating for Paul. Now, do you see why Paul calls him brother? You get whooped on my behalf, you will always be one of my favorite people. No wonder Paul has respect for this guy, because this satisfies the hunger in the crowd for some type of retribution. But he takes this, he takes his beating, but we know one thing for certain. He does become a Christian. I don't know if he becomes a Christian after this beating or before this beating, but he sees how he's treated by his countrymen, the same people that he thinks are on his side, pull him out and start harming him. Who can he really trust? Isn't that how you operate at work, in your families? Isn't that kind of the core of us trying to do life, of trying to discern who can you trust and who is not trustworthy? We're always trying to figure this out. Who are the people with us? Who are the people against us? Paul says Sosthenes is a guy with me. He's willing to even be beaten for me. They grab him. They all seize Sosthenes, the ruler of the synagogue, and beat him in front of the tribunal. And Gallio says, I don't care. Think about your life and the relationships that you have. There's people that may be against what you're trying to do. There may be people who are all for what you're trying to do. But the majority of people usually just don't care. They're not for it or against it. They're in the middle. They just kind of wish it would go away. What kind of individual are you? Are you somebody that your friends can count on? Are you somebody that your church can count on? Are you somebody your kids can count on? What kind of character are you? Now, Benedict Arnold was a turncoat. They thought they could count on him, but he wanted to deliver West Point to the British Army. But what's interesting is somebody who doesn't have strength of character, somebody who is not trustworthy, doesn't really become trustworthy to those that they turn even with. Now, it's interesting After the war, he goes over to Britain, and he became kind of friends with the Whig Party, but the Tories, they did not like him one single bit, because you know what? They realized something about Benedict Arnold. He's not trustworthy. They didn't have respect for him. He wasn't somebody that you could count on because of his lack of trustworthiness to the Americans. The British didn't even trust him. He had to go back to New Brunswick, to Canada. I don't know if you knew this, but he was actually Canadian for a while. And we didn't even like him. And we were still loyal to the Queen. He has to go back to work. Because even the people he helped, because he wasn't trustworthy, didn't trust him. Sosthenes is somebody that you can count on. Benedict Arnold was somebody, he was only looking for himself and out for himself. At the end of life, we're all going to have to make a decision. How are we going to end our life? It's interesting that when God judges us, He doesn't judge us just with one particular situation, but He judges our life. What kind of life are you going to live? Benedict Arnold may have been judged as a hero in America if he died from his leg wound. Imagine how grotesque it would be for you, knowing this reality, to go to Benedict Arnold University. That you would say, I didn't go to Harvard, I went to Benedict Arnold. But in our reality, there's stories written about Benedict Arnold to children. And you know what all the stories say? How when he was a kid, he picked the wings off of bugs. And he stole eggs from chickens. Back then, you may think, well, that's not that bad. This was some bad stuff. This is how you scared kids away from being traitors. But if he died then, he might have been a hero. But we know his character. Sosthenes dies as a hero. He's remembered as a hero of the faith because he had conviction and you could count on him. Look at what Revelation 14:13 says. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, write this, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Blessed indeed, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, for their deeds follow them. Are you somebody the Lord can count on? And are you somebody that others can count on? When we make the decision to become Christians, we answer that call. If we will believe, confess, repent, be baptized for the remission of our sins. And it's not one of these type of commitments that we make haphazardly. But when we make that commitment, we are telling God and everybody else, when it comes to Christianity, you can count on me. Maybe you have wandered off. Maybe you're living in a way that doesn't show that God can count on you. Maybe you're living in a way that others can't count on you. You have an opportunity to make that right as we stand and sing the invitation song.